Ah, okay. This is Le Chat once it gets...
Yeah.
Yeah, you might want to stick it on that side so you can read it a little better.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. And then the document.
Is that good?
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay.
Excellent.
Now just wait for people to show up. Do you want to say something?
Something.
Okay. There's 3 people.
Okay, so it's, I guess, just a matter of time before they show up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, doke. So we're going to go hurry up and wait for a little bit anyways. All right, go. Thank you very much, little girl. Appreciate it.
Did you figure it out?
Yeah, got it working.
Ooh, smarty.
Okay, so that's just that. Shalom, Yafa. Just sitting here waiting for people to clock in.
Oh, where is that camera they were thinking of buying?
I can probably find one over at Staples.
Maybe Linda knows.
Yeah. Shalom, Alex. How you doing? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
So just hanging out here waiting for people to step in. Did you get my email with the handout for today's stuff? Yeah, I know. Sort of an accident of timing. Yeah. Last night we talked about it. The traditional Pesach and Yeshua's Pesach were actually on 2 different nights. I'm glad you can make it, Alex. I'm glad to see your smiling icon. Great, thank you. As long as it gets there, people can read off the screen for today, but then can go back and download it from the website later. I guess that would be fine. Oh, I do have a silly question for you. Come here, look. On this text box, got that little thing right there. Can we get rid of it somehow? Okay, I guess we'll wait until we can wait till this is over and experiment with it later. All right, thank you. We're a little bit nervous here. Elisheva is the one who set this up and operated it the last two sessions. She went home, so it's Abigail who put it up and got things running. I'm still pretty much clueless. I believe so. And, did we set up the video to be seen everywhere or elsewhere?
I don't know how to do that.
Don't know how to do that. We'll have to see about that. Excuse me, all of a sudden I'm coughing. Am I in your way here?
No, my book is just too big.
That's right. Well, I usually mouse left-handed, but I put it over here in case you need to reach it.
I just realized that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all right. I'm highly talented. I can mouse with both hands. Or maybe each hand separately. I don't think I've really tried it both hands at the same time.
Today's a different day. Auntie Linda sent us instructions on how to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Next time.
Yeah. At this point, I'm kind of afraid to touch anything. So we'll get it right next time. If we have to add it to our... Elisheva gave us some directions on how to set this up. It's kind of overly complicated, but it's... I don't know if you can just go into YouTube, you go to YouTube Studio and run it from there, but Elisheva has us going through, is it OBD Studios or something like that, to set some things up and then try to connect that through YouTube. So, well, you know, this is a learning thing for all of us. Shalom, Bernadette. Good to see you on. We're just hanging out here for a few minutes. Waiting to see who's going to make it. So I was just thinking, one of the things I noticed when I've seen live chats off YouTube, it seems to start right in on the subject. So they must go back and edit the first several minutes. No, really?
Mm-mm.
So, because it doesn't seem to me like there's a lot of,
I think there's a different way to do it.
you know, chop the first couple minutes off of the thing, so that when you go back and look at the live stream later, it starts right on the subject. All right. Well, I got a better chance of reading the messages this time. Last night was really hard because I was trying to get the table in on the picture because it was set for the Passover, which put the computer screen way far out of my focus range. So that made it kind of difficult. But we're doing it a little bit differently this time, and we're okay, really. My daughter's shaking her head no. No. All right. We'll let it go just a little bit further, then we'll get started. What are we doing?
Nothing. There's 8 people now.
Mm-hmm. So some people haven't texted in yet, but that's okay. We're still going to go maybe 2 more minutes, and then we'll get started proper. Chag Matzot Sameach, Kelly. And Barbara, under her own name this time. Shalom. Good. It'll be a good day. I'm still getting used to the concept of there being a 15 to 30 second delay from the time I say something and the time you actually hear it. Okay, you may not have gotten an email. Part of that was simply I was slow getting information out, and there may not have been an email sent. I don't know, at least not this time. That's right, Jason was there. Yeah. Sounds good. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. Whoever comes in later can come in later. I guess formally welcome you all. Shalom. And we're going to be in Galatians chapter 1. We just started this series in Galatians at the shul before the meeting got shut down. And I was noticing that in the past, usually by the time we're done with the Parsha discussion, which is a fairly long meeting, that in and of itself, a lot of people just went home. I guess it was just too long of a day. So I'm trying something different now that we've gotten somewhat accustomed to meeting online. Switch Galatians over to Wednesday as a regular thing. And we can run through the whole, that way we're a little more fresh and a little more focused on the text and the study and stuff. So what we're doing is we already got started the first lesson or two on Galatians, but I wanted to go back and restart just so we can have the entire course on the videos and on the recordings. So that's what we're doing right now. And keep remembering all the things after the fact. I suppose I'm supposed to start with Shalom, everybody. This is Simchat Yeshua Messianic Fellowship of West Covina, California. My name's Gene. People call me all kinds of names, so I don't want to repeat them all here. And of course all the YouTubes I've watched lately. The first thing the first thing they always say is like, subscribe, and hit the notification. And so I've done my part. Okay, on with the show. Okay. This first lesson, for those of you who hadn't seen it or hadn't heard it before, is basically an introduction. We get a few verses into Galatians 1, but most of it is an introduction to the book of Galatians. And so let's just go ahead and dive in. Please feel free to type in a request or a comment, a question or a comment as we go, and I'll try to keep looking back and forth and picking up the questions and comments as we go. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the beginning of Galatians, the first chapter. Of course, it's always good to start with a question. Did Shaul write to completely Gentile congregations in the Roman province of Galatia? Okay. Already we have to stop and explain. Shaul is the Hebrew name for whom we know as Paul. Okay. Paul describes himself as a shaliach, an emissary, somebody who's sent out. That's in the Greek text, that's known as apostle. I guess I need to take a little bit of a diversion here and just do a little desensitization on the title or the description. It was not uncommon to use the word shaliach for somebody who was sent out for a task, to do something, sent by somebody else. And it's a very common word, even in English to today, except usually we use the word as emissary or missionary or agent. Somebody who's sent out to represent somebody else. And there are strict rules as to how you do that. You're not allowed to exceed the mandate given to you. You are only to convey the information given in your mandate, and your value as a shaliach is based on how well you maintain that mandate without going too far or not explaining everything fully enough. So in the sense that some people argue that Paul was not a proper apostle because he was not one of the original 12 or the selected replacement in Acts chapter 1. Realistically, that's irrelevant because everybody who is sent on a task to do something is an apostle. That's just the Greek word for what we call emissary or missionary or agent. And there are a number of other words that we can use that fit that general description. So a little desensitization on that particular term. So later on, he explains himself as a shaliach or an emissary, somebody sent on a task. Okay, and if someone ever wants to wonder, how could Paul call himself an apostle? Well, from Antioch, he was sent out to reach the Gentiles, and that made him an apostle. So whether or not you want to argue if it's A with a capital A or apostle without a capital A, it doesn't matter. He was still officially sent out by somebody, and apparently by God, through the agency of the congregation in Antioch. Okay. All right, so back to our question. Did Shaul write to completely Gentile congregations in the Roman province of Galatia? If so, he never visited them. Or did he write to the congregations of Messianic Jews he visited in Acts 14 and 15 when he was on his trip sent out by the Antioch congregation? Obviously, mixed congregations, but the letter concerns an issue relating to Gentiles. Okay, we know from the terminology in Galatians it was a mixed congregation. There were Jews and Gentiles in the congregation, and there was a particular mix within the congregation that gave rise to the problem for which Paul is writing. Okay, and so I'm going to introduce the basic topic right here up front. The book is how Gentiles should see and relate to Torah. Now, that's a very broad topic because even in Paul's letter, he does not differentiate between his use of the word law when he's discussing something. And so you have to look at the context, and there are a couple of safe presuppositions we can apply when Paul's talking about law. Within his writings, there's at least 4 different ways that Paul uses the word law. One, of course, is Torah, God's commandments. He also uses the word law to talk about the rules of the Pharisees as law. And then he also, in Romans, more specifically, he talks about the law of sin and death and the law of the law of the members which war within us, our members which war within us. Those last two you really don't see here in Galatians. Primarily, it's law or law. So what you need to do every time you see the word law then is you have to stop and think, which description of law is he doing? Because obviously they're not the same. And one of the generalizations I can suggest to begin with is, would Shaul ever have told people to disregard Torah? And that should be, a very good qualification question to use in discussing, which version of law are you reading when you read the word law in the text, because he uses in the Greek text, the word nomos is used both ways without any further description. So the context has to tell you what's in the text. Okay, now when was this written? Probably written before Acts 15. The reason for that is Acts 15 settles an issue about what to do with Gentiles in the Messianic community. The bottom line in Acts 15, verse 21 specifically, is that Gentiles were not required to become Jews by conversion, and were not required to become Pharisees by conversion, but rather they were to find a synagogue and to learn Torah by attending the synagogue. That was the rule in Acts 15:21. Okay, now let's get our first verse. Oops, let me see here if I can roll this a little bit. Paul, an apostle, not from men nor through man, but through Messiah Yeshua and God the Father, who raised him from the dead. Okay, so we have an opening phrase and immediately an argument. I think this is why it made sense for Paul to be sent as an emissary to the Gentiles. He knew how to argue. Other people like Kepha or Peter were very good for. Hold on a second. Give me a. Got a couple of text messages. Can you check and see if they're anything? He starts off with an argument. Somebody different, like Peter, has a different temperament, tends to take the approach of challenging people, and especially fellow Jews, by saying, this Messiah whom you have crucified is the very one that the prophets proclaimed. Now, what are you going to do about it? So it's a different personality, it's a different approach, and that works within the Jewish community. They didn't have to discuss Torah, they didn't have to discuss how to live Torah, but rather, how do you deal with the person of Yeshua? So that was it's a different personality type and a different mission, as you will, or a different assignment, a different being sent to do something. Okay. So Paul is the arguer. Okay. Paul, little citation here out of the Jewish New Testament commentary. In this verse, we are given Shaul's Roman name, Paul, the Greek Paulos, undoubtedly because his ministry was primarily among Gentiles. The name Paul appears 132 times in Acts 13 to 28, in the chapters 13 to 28. 30 times in his 13 letters, and once in 2 Kepha Bet, 2 Peter 3:15. Shaul, Paul, remained a Jew all his life, indeed indeed an observant Jew, as he identifies in Acts 16:3 and a number of other places, and also chapter 21, verse 21 in Acts. even a Pharisee in Acts 23:6 and Philippians 3:5, while nevertheless sparing no effort to bring to Gentiles the gospel of Yeshua the Messiah. Okay. Some claim Shaul gave up his old Jewish name and took on a new Christian name, which he kept for the rest of his life in order to identify himself henceforth as no longer a Jew, but as a Christian. But as explained above, he did no such thing. Rather, Shaul, like Yochanan, surnamed Mark, such as in Acts 12:12 and also verse 25, like Hadassah, that is Esther 2:7, and like many Jews today who in the diaspora had two names all his life, a Hebrew name and a name in the local language. Okay, he calls himself an apostle, apostolos in Greek, Hebrew shaliach. It means somebody sent, a missionary, agent, representative, ambassador. In Shaul's case, both from Yeshua and from the congregation in Antioch. Okay, and I already talked about that a little bit. The person commissioned is required to act strictly within the scope of his mandate and fulfill it to the smallest detail. Sorry, the printing's kind of small the way this is set up for me, so I'm trying to find a good focus point in my glasses, and sometimes I succeed. If he exceeds his authority, all his actions are rendered null and void. His commission may also be revoked by the principal. And as a claims adjuster and an insurance agent, we were both in both circumstances, I was under a mandate to only do what I was authorized to do or to say. And that's very strictly controlled, and you can get yourself in some pretty deep trouble if you violate that mandate. Okay. So he's an apostle, not from men. A Hebrew play on words is B'nai Adam al Yadei Adam, without sons of men, but not upon the hands of man. Shaul declares his ordination, his smicha in Hebrew, comes from Yeshua, Acts 9, verses 1 to 16. Thus, he is equal in stature to the other apostles who are also called by Yeshua, even if out of time, as he identifies in 1 Corinthians 15. See also 1 Corinthians, other citations there on the page. Who raised him from the dead. Now, how can a dead Messiah ordain Shaul? Another argument supporting the resurrection. Okay, and you'll see that Shaul, changes subjects frequently and without too much regard for us following sometimes. Okay, verse 2. Okay, so he identifies himself and then says, hello to all the brethren who are with me, or from all the brethren who are with me, to the congregation of Galatia. Okay, and all the brethren who are with me, from all of us to all of you. Sorry about that. Shaul is not alone in his doctrine and message. Brothers is usually used to refer to fellow Israelites, such as Tehillim, Psalms 122, verse 8. But it may now reference an expansion of who is a brother to non-Jews who belong to Yeshua, such as Romans 11:17, Galatians 3:26-29, and Ephesians 3:6. To all the congregations, in Greek, ecclesiae, Hebrew, kehilot, because it's plural. Kehilah is singular, kehilot is plural. Congregations, shuls if you like Yiddish, or churches if you like English. Okay, of Galatia. So, next question, where is Galatia and who is there? Okay, as is clear from the map, let me scroll down to where you can start seeing some of it. Yeah, it's pretty good. As you can see, as is clear from the map, Galatia was located in the center of Anatolia, sandwiched between Asia and Cappadocia, Acts, but not Paul, mentions Pauline activity in places like Pisidia, Antioch, and Lystra, which are in the lower central part of Galatia, but identifies them by ethnic names, Pisidia and Lycaonia. So you know what I mean, Lycaonia. Not by the provincial name Galatia. Okay, and let me finish scrolling up here so you can take a look at the... We do... this is supposed to be getting up on our website so you can download and print your own version of this. Okay, so if you look at this, of course, this is a picture of Paul's travels, and so it's the picture covers more detail than the actual Galatia. But in what is now modern Turkey, if you look right to the middle of modern Turkey, you have the big title Galatia, and you can see it was a landlocked area with other provinces surrounding it. Okay. And you'll notice there's an Antioch of Galatia, but also a little further down on the northeast corner of the Mediterranean Sea there, right above where it says Syria, there's another Antioch. And so you have an Antioch of Syria and an Antioch of Galatia. I guess they didn't have enough confusion during those days, so they decided to name two prominent cities after that. Okay, now a little fun. The Greek word Galatai is understood literally to mean Celts. Like Luke, Paul uses an ethnic designation, not the Roman political one, but Celts. That's right, Celts. Okay. In the 3rd century BCE, Celtic tribes moved into the area south of the Black Sea and settled there. It would be natural for Paul to address people living there as Celts, and he would have been very unlikely to so name people living, that is, in Lystra. The churches of Galatia most likely were located in the major cities of the ancient Celtic settlement: Ankara, Pessinus, and Tavium. I hope like Tavium. Sorry, I'm a little bit fuzzy here with my vision. Okay, and what had happened? The Celts actually, as a people group, sprang up in Eastern Europe, traveled down to this area and dispossessed the previous occupants in this area, kind of overtook the area. And then, thank you. Kind of overtook the previous occupants, took over the area, and then was eventually displaced also by other people groups. And so the Celts eventually moved up to the north and to the west, and eventually occupied the northern European area around Flanders, before getting pushed all the way out to what is now England and Ireland and Scotland, which is where we now think of Celts. And of course, then even after that, there's a whole bunch that moved over to the New World and formed a basketball team in Boston. Sorry, I always have to put that in. Okay. So that's how you end up with Celts. And if you think about it, if you can match the word Galatians with the word that we have for the Celtic language, Gaelic, I think you get a sort of a little glimpse of how there can be the same people group, because they sound close to being enough the same that the Gaelic of the Celts, was possible for the name of the area, Galatia. The area of the Gauls. So Anyways, let's move on. Verse 3, grace to you and peace from God the Father and our Lord Yeshua HaMashiach. Okay, grace to you and peace. Hebrew, chesed v'shalom, loving kindness and peace. Okay. Excuse me. I kind of passed on this when I was developing this, but that's okay. Over the last couple of years, I've been reassessing the use of the word grace because it's classically defined in Christian circles as unmerited favor. And a couple of years back, sort of came to the understanding that the word grace is better understood as merited favor, not unmerited favor. And it's really kind of if you're not used to that, it may take a little time. And if you have trouble with that, I think I have a handout that I prepared for that discussion on how to look at the word grace differently. And if you think about it, every time you see the word grace, just ask yourself, is this describing merited favor or unmerited favor? And that's sort of the short answer. And I think you'll find that nearly every example of the word grace in either the Tanakh or the Brit Hadashah comes to mean merited favor. And I'll give you one quick example on that. Actually, a couple of them. The first appearance of the word grace comes in Genesis, where it says that Noah found grace in God's eyes. So we know from that it means that that Noah was an unmitigated rascal and always doing evil, and God just chose to be nice to him anyways, right? No, that's not what the text says. But the idea is that, Noah was perfect in his generations, meaning that he lived in the ways of God, as did his family. And so, that grace then was merited as a sign of his status and favor with God. Okay. The other example is another really great one. After Yeshua overstayed in Jerusalem, and his parents had to go, running back and try to find him, and found him in the temple. He finally went home with his parents, and the description about what he did is that he grew in grace and stature. Okay. Now, if he grew in grace and stature, grace must mean unmerited favor. Therefore, our Messiah was a rascal and a ne'er-do-well, but God just put up with it in order to accomplish his goals of our salvation, our redemption. Or grace means it was merited favor, and as Yeshua grew, both getting bigger and older, that he was building a reputation of being good, right, just, and proper in all his ways. Okay, so I know it's a long explanation about grace, but I just want to make sure you understand that. So grace and peace. The word shalom means not only peace, but also tranquility, safety, well-being, welfare, and health, contentment, success, comfort, wholeness, and integrity, and probably a few more that didn't make the list. Okay. So when you wish shalom on somebody, that's what you're wishing for somebody. When you're asking for God to give shalom to somebody, this is what we're asking for them. Then verse 4, who gave himself for our sins, that he might deliver us from this present evil age, according to the will of our God and Father. Okay. Together with verse 1 and also the second half of verse 3 through 5, epitomizes the good news. Yeshua the Messiah's atoning death, forgiveness of sins, salvation, obedience to God's will, resurrection, and continuing authority, all for God's glory. This is the standard against which to measure the false, supposedly good news of verses 6 through 9, which we're going to get into on our next week's study. Okay. To whom be glory forever and ever. Amen. Okay. Amen is intended to prompt a congregational response. So hopefully, if you're all hip with that, you'd be saying amen to yourselves while you're on your end of the computer. When the letter is read aloud. Okay, so the idea, and this is why we use the word amen, is to prompt people to say, the prayer is over, and so we can all answer with emunah, I believe. Okay. Like Romans 9:5, the Galatians amen is a public statement of affirmation and agreement with Shaul's version of the good news, contrasting with the version described in the following verses. Okay. That's our basic walkthrough on this. This goes a whole lot quicker when I'm just reading it and doing my own commentary. Obviously, when we do this face-to-face, there's a whole lot more discussion that goes on.
That's where you left.
Okay, this is where I left off. Okay.
Do I read it?
Yeah, okay, Bernadette. I was looking up Arabia.
I think it's what
Said my name Medina, being in the Islam area. Shaul went there and to Damascus. Okay, someone tried to teach me years ago. I couldn't understand then. Please help. Yes, there is a discrepancy, perhaps, in which Sinai is being spoken. Which Sinai is meant by Paul when he mentions Sinai of Arabia. Okay. Now we know in the southern part of Israel, which is now called the Sinai Peninsula, there is a mountain chain called Mount Sinai, or the Sinai Mountains. But there's also there is also a mountain in the western side of the Arabian Peninsula that is also called Mount Sinai. Okay, and I would contend that if you read the discussion of the places the children of Israel went when they got out of Egypt, just the whole idea of crossing the Red Sea and continuing on seems a little strange if you're going to double back and end up back at Mount Sinai in the southern tip, or the southern portion of the Sinai Peninsula of what's now modern Israel. It seems to make more sense. This was a more singular direction going southeast through the Red Sea and then continuing down to the Mount Sinai of Arabia. And it's possible that even by Shaul's time, you have an argument brewing as to exactly which Mount Sinai was the Mount Sinai. I don't have a whole lot of factual information or background to say with great assuredness that one is correct and the other is not. So I would not. I would say this is an idea. Be aware that there's a fair suggestion that the Sinai of Arabia is the correct one, but I'm not going to be dogmatic about it because I don't have. I'm not a historian. I'm not a geologist. I'm not. I'm not somebody who has very intimately studied all the place names of the places where Israel camped on the way down to Sinai. So for now, I'm going to take it for what it appears to be. Plain and simple, it was a direct path down into the Arabian Peninsula rather than circling up around the Red Sea and back to the Sinai Peninsula. But, I'm not going to be dogmatic, so take it as it is.
David said it can mean my country, Medina.
Medina?
Hebrew.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm not sure if the Medina in Arabia is a Spanish name like Medina that most people have as a last name around here. They're spelled the same way, but I don't know if they're exactly the same word. Okay.
Barbara said Genesis chapter 6. Noah walked perfect with the Lord.
Yeah. So in the argument of grace being unmerited favor, that's a on the surface there's a contradiction if you demand that grace means unmerited favor. So that's an argument in favor of grace meaning merited favor. If that's a new concept to you, don't stress on it. It took me a while of chewing on it and working on it before I finally got to where it made sense to me that I could be comfortable talking about it. So, I do not expect everyone to just immediately drop what they understand, have been taught for years, and suddenly grasp what I'm talking about just because I say it. So take your time with it. Okay. Okay, is that it for all the questions, comments, and rebukes?
Mm-hmm. You can wait for more to come in.
Okay. Medina in Hebrew can mean my country. Okay. Hebrew and Arabic are sister languages, and they have a lot of similar words, so it's quite possible. Hebrew, my country, can be the same as Medina can be in Arabic as well. Okay, that's it for our lesson for today. As far as what I had planned, that doesn't mean that you don't have any other questions or comments or rebukes. Now's your chance. Get them in, and I can deal with them as best as I can, or I could at least make up things as I go. So any last chance for questions, comments, and rebukes. We will get into more heavier doctrinal stuff once we get into, actually next week is going to be more the same. Oh, that reminds me, question for you. We started at 6 this week, and I just wanted to ask you if this is a good time for you, if a different time would be better, if you want it earlier, later, if you'd prefer a different time, say so. I'll take it all into consideration. I'd rather have a circumstance where we're all together, in the same place, rather than minimizing the number of people who can't make it because of conflicts. Okay. Go ahead.
Bernadette says Shaul spoke from a perspective of not being a false teaching.
Exactly. Yeah. Good. Yeah, we'll get into more of that because of the nature of the conflict that he wrote to Galatians. He needs, and we'll establish that even further. But he did mention that he identifies as an apostle of Messiah Yeshua, and therefore a person of authority who should be heard out and respected. Okay, Kelly says not later, please. Yeah, you already. It's already late for you, and I'm sorry. So if we can start about 10 o'clock in the evening our time, would you be happy with that? No, just kidding. Okay, Linda says 6 works. Thank you very much. Okay, yeah, beginning now is, not yet. It's not quite completely sundown yet, I think. Actually, no, we're not quite there for sundown here in California. But, Chag Matzot. It doesn't matter if you're doing the Sadducee tradition of doing Pesach at the beginning of the 14th, like we did last night, or if you're going to do the Pharisee tradition of doing Pesach at the end of the 14th, which is starting right about now. Either way, we start Chag Matzot at sundown, both of us. Now, I was noticing something. This is the first year in a long, long time that I can recall where the days of the week actually lay out in the biblical fashion for Messiah's week. And that reminds me, amongst all the other things I want to post for everybody to pull down from the website, is Gail's study on Messiah's week. So if I can remember all this stuff, I'll get her done. But I also have this last Sabbath study as well as last night. I want to get posted on the website. So what was I going to get at?
Sorry.
It turns out that if we go with the Sadducee tradition, because it appears in the text that Yeshua followed the beginning of the 14th as the day to do the Passover, because his arrest was that night. The trial before Pilate was in the morning during Passover day. And a curious identifier is that somewhere around the time of the afternoon sacrifice, the evening sacrifice, is when he died, which was identified as the time that the Passover was to be killed. Now that throws you into some confusion unless you recognize the difference in starting time, Sadducee versus Pharisee. And so as far as the Pharisees are concerned, the time he died was the time to kill the Passover. However, for the Sadducee tradition, he had done it the day before, about 24 hours earlier. Then, of course, he was buried in the ground before sundown on this evening, and then you have an actual 3 full days and nights until Saturday evening, just after sundown, when he resurrected, or just about sundown when he resurrected. Some people like to argue at length about whether it was just before or just after sundown. I'm not too concerned about the argument. I'm more happy with the fact that he resurrected. The point being, though, this year's unusual. Most often it doesn't work out this way. So this year it's quite a blessing for us to actually count the same 3 days and 3 nights. Okay.
Bernadette had a question.
Yeah.
Did Yeshua actually say these words, "Are you that stupid," in Galatians 33? Oh, sorry. That verse is in Galatians 33. She said it later.
That foolish, you mean? Yeah, he says, "Oh, you foolish." It was Shaul, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he called them foolish. Okay, and when we get into the details of what the Galatian Gentiles were giving up just to try to satisfy someone who will never be satisfied with you, it was a terrible piece of foolishness, yes. And that's the short answer. We'll get into more detail as we get to that text where we can discuss it more fully.
Auntie Kelly said she can't join the live at 6, or that time we discussed earlier.
Okay, well, not later than 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she's 2 hours.
Ahead.
Yeah, 2 hours ahead of us.
Okay.
2 hours. Okay. So anything else? That's okay, Bernadette. I wasn't looking it up anyways. I knew what you were talking about. I know. I know, Kelly. I was teasing. Okay. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? It's getting dark in here.
It is. Sorry.
I can turn on the. You roll that up, maybe turn on the kitchen lights. So it's not that I'm really that vain, but
It doesn't.
maybe someone would like to actually see my face, and then be reminded why it's better not to. Yeah, it's getting real close to sundown here. Okay. That's good. I can see. I can see. Okay. Okay, we start counting the Omer on Saturday evening. That'll be the first of the Omer. Saturday at sundown. Yeah, it'll be day one of the Omer Saturday night. And then every evening for the next 50 days, we count that. And just to add as much possible to the confusion that goes on between biblical and Orthodox tradition, there's going to be a difference in how the Omer is counted during these 50 days, and we'll get into that detail as we begin the counting of the Omer. So we'll explain it there. Again, it has to do with Pharisee tradition versus Sadducee tradition. Okay. Okay, what does circumcision have to do with this? Circumcision is the token activity which describes the whole argument that Paul is making. Because when you do a conversion to being Orthodox, or at that time to being a Pharisee, you would go through your conversion classes, and when you were finally, you'd go through, you'd have an examination, you would be accepted to be qualified to become a Jew properly. Then once you were accepted for that, you would have a mikveh, you would have a baptism, and the picture is always the same when it comes to baptism. You go down, the old person goes down and dies, as it were, under the water, and you come up a new creation. Okay, and that's the same picture, same description, pretty much for everybody. And so you come up, you're now a new person. So what do you do as a new creation? As if you were brand new born, what's the first thing that a man's going to do, or boy's going to do, a little boy chick's going to do when he's born? Okay, within 8 days, you're to be circumcised. Okay, and you're not considered fully converted to being a Jew until you get that circumcision. So the process of converting to a Pharisee in that day, and this exactly matches the issues and arguments that are going on with Orthodox today. Once you're not fully accepted until you have that circumcision. And and I make the argument that you're never really fully accepted. You're going to throw away your relationship with Messiah in order to try to appease people who are never going to be happy with you. And I've seen that many, many, many times. People who grow up Jewish never really fully accept a converted Gentile. In the back of their minds, you're always going to be a goy. And that happens, and that's reality. And so in Paul's argument to the Galatians, it's a perfect argument to cover, with somebody who is messianic and find themselves attracted to an Orthodox lifestyle, or thinking that they will be more acceptable if they become Orthodox, or somehow God will love them more because they're Orthodox. Galatians is a perfect argument as to why you shouldn't consider that. And okay, what does that mean for us females, and how can we be today? Well, obviously the ladies never got the circumcision; it was only for the men. But nonetheless, so you would have been considered converted to being Jewish with the mikveh, with the baptism alone. There was no circumcision to follow for girls. Okay, but nonetheless, the circumcision became the token of the whole argument of what you got to do to become acceptable to the Pharisees of that day or to the Orthodox of today. The arguments are the same, by the way. There is an amazing similarity between Pharisees of then and Orthodox of today, especially with regards to this argument. And we have to guard ourselves from thinking that somehow, we will be more saved or more proper or more acceptable to God if we make that conversion. When in reality, we are trading our Messiah for man-made rules. Yeah, to make our man-made rules into what's going to be our guide, our light, our the basis of our relationship with Hashem. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions, comments, or rebukes? Okay. If you have any thoughts about the word circumcision, meaning this whole argument, it's okay. We're going to be running into this time and time and time again throughout the whole book of Galatians. So this won't be the last time we talk about it. So if you're not entirely sure about what to ask or how to ask, it'll show up again many times over. Okay. Okay. Now, because there's a time delay, I'm going to be quiet for a little while and see if anybody else has something else to ask or to add.
Bernadette says thank you.
Yes. You're quite welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Why is the sky blue?
That's so funny.
Because God said so. Okay. That'll do for us tonight. God bless you. We'll plan this again for next Wednesday. Just remembered something. I forgot to. Okay. Were those texts from Robert?
No.
Okay. We're supposed to meet tonight.
Oh, good job.
I've been remembering all week to mention it, and then I forgot.
It's still working in the sky.
Okay.
Opposites attract.
Yeah. Which, by the way, you're pretty close on that, because the word in Hebrew for the color blue, as it's translated for us, is techelet, and there is not really a good biblical translation of techelet, because most of the time I see it just says blue. But in modern Hebrew, my modern Hebrew dictionary translates techelet as azure. Now, azure, of course, is sky blue, or the color of the reflected sky off of the ocean. So the question is, what color is sky blue? And you just kind of you end up having to shrug your shoulders, because you can get a color off the sky, look at it, and then 5 minutes later it's going to be a different shade. So I think rather than one particular and only shade of blue for the tefillin, it's a wide range of blue, a wide range of shades and types of blue that would be sufficient. Okay. It's in Numbers 15. Numbers 15 is the basic commandment to wear tzitzit, and the tassel, the tzitzit, is supposed to have a thread of blue. Okay. Tradition is to do without the thread of blue because of this discussion over what shade of blue or what's the exact process. If it was that exacting that God had required, He would have certainly given us that exacting stuff. But oh well. Yeah. Yeah, Bernadette, using the seat. Okay. Anything else? Okay. For the third time. Let's close it off. And shalom. God bless you. We'll see you for our continuing episodes in Galatians next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. All right. Shalom. God bless you. And we'll talk to you later.